The phone call came at 3 a.m., and Mara Velez knew before she answered that someone was dead. In Sao Paulo's suffocating heat, death didn't knock politely. It crashed through your door wearing expensive shoes and speaking perfect English. The voice on the line was cold, corporate, American. Miss Velez, your sister is gone. Your father requires your presence in New York. Immediately. Mara had never met her sister, had never been acknowledged by her father, had spent 24 years being nothing, no one, invisible. But blood, it seemed, had a price. And when the powerful needed a replacement, even ghosts could be summoned back to life. They wanted her for something. And in her world, when rich men wanted something from poor women, it was never, ever good. If you want to know whether Mara survives what comes next, whether she escapes or burns it all down, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The favela didn't sleep. Mara could hear it breathing through the thin walls of the apartment, the distant throb of music from the bar 3 streets down, the crack of motorcycles tearing through narrow alleys, voices raised in argument or laughter or desperation. Sao Paulo's heat pressed down like a hand over her mouth, thick and relentless even at this hour, turning the small room into an airless box. She sat on the edge of her mother's bed, watching the shallow rise and fall of Elena Velez's chest. Each breath was a struggle. Each one sounded like it might be the last. The oxygen machine hummed beside the bed, a sound Mara had grown to hate. It was expensive. Everything about keeping her mother alive was expensive. The medications lined up on the scratched dresser, the tank refills, the doctor visits that never seemed to help. All of it bled Mara dry, month after month, no matter how many shifts she worked. 3 jobs. She worked 3 jobs and it still wasn't enough. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it. Probably the restaurant asking her to cover someone's shift again. She'd already worked a double today. Morning at the cleaning service, afternoon at the call center, evening waiting tables until her feet screamed. Her next shift started in 4 hours. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Mara's jaw tightened. She reached for it, ready to tell whoever it was to leave her alone, and froze. Unknown number. International code. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Nobody called her from outside Brazil. Nobody who mattered knew she existed outside this cramped apartment, this endless cycle of work and worry and watching her mother fade. She answered. Miss Velez? The voice was male, American, smooth as polished steel. Mara Velez? Who is this? Her Portuguese accent thickened when she was tired. She forced herself to focus. How did you get this number? My name is Richard Stanton. I'm an attorney representing the Harrington family. A pause, calculated and cold. Your father's family. The words hit her like a fist to the stomach. She hadn't heard that name, Harrington, spoken aloud in years. Her mother never said it. It lived in the silence between them, in the carefully avoided questions, in the way Elena's face would close down whenever Mara asked about the American man who'd left them behind. I don't have a father, Mara said quietly. Her hand was shaking. She pressed the phone harder against her ear. Not one that counts. Nevertheless, Stanton's voice didn't change, didn't soften. I'm calling to inform you of a death in the family. Your half-sister, Victoria Harrington, passed away 3 days ago. The funeral is scheduled for this weekend in New York. Victoria. Mara had seen her once, years ago, in a magazine Elena had hidden in a drawer. A glossy photograph of a girl in a white dress at some charity gala, blonde and perfect and untouchable. The daughter James Harrington had kept. The one he'd chosen. I'm sorry for your loss, Mara said automatically, though she felt nothing. How could she mourn someone she'd never known? But I don't understand why you're calling me. Your presence is required at the estate, Stanton said. There are matters that need to be discussed in person. Arrangements have been made for your travel. A car will collect you tomorrow morning at 8. Wait, what? Number 1, I can't just leave. I have work. Your mother's medical expenses will be covered during your absence, Stanton interrupted smoothly. In-home care, medications, everything she needs. Consider it a gesture of goodwill from the family. Mara's breath caught. She looked at her mother, at the bruised hollows beneath Elena's eyes, at the way her collarbones pressed sharp against papery skin. The next round of treatments was due in 2 weeks. Mara had been calculating how many extra shifts she could beg for, which bills she could let slide, whether she could skip meals to make the numbers work. Why? The word came out raw. Why now? He never cared before, never sent money, never called, never... Mr. Harrington will explain everything when you arrive. Stanton's tone made it clear the conversation was ending. The car will be there at 8. I suggest you be ready. The line went dead. Mara sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, while her mother's labored breathing filled the silence. She didn't sleep. By the time dawn leaked gray light through the window, Mara had made and discarded 100 plans. Run, refuse, pretend she'd never gotten the call. But every thought circled back to the same truth. They knew where she was. They'd found her number, her address, probably knew every detail of her desperate, grinding life. And they were offering help. Help she desperately needed. At 7:30, she pulled on her least-worn dress. Dark blue, simple, bought secondhand 3 years ago for a job interview she hadn't gotten. She brushed her dark hair until it lay smooth down her back, applied the bare minimum of makeup to hide how exhausted she was. Her mother was still sleeping or unconscious. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Mara pressed a kiss to her forehead, the skin hot and papery beneath her lips. "I'll be back soon," she whispered. "I promise." The car arrived exactly at 8. It was black and enormous, the kind of vehicle Mara had only seen in movies. The driver who emerged was built like a wall, wearing a dark suit despite the climbing heat. He didn't speak, just opened the rear door and waited. Mara climbed in, pulse hammering. The interior was all leather and cold air conditioning, so different from the stifling apartment that it felt like stepping into another world. The driver closed her door with a solid thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling. They drove through morning traffic toward the airport in silence. Mara watched Sao Paulo slide past the tinted windows, the favela giving way to commercial districts, then to the sleek high-rises of the wealthy. Two worlds existing side by side, never touching. She'd never been on a plane before. The realization hit her as they pulled up to a private terminal, far from the chaos of the main airport. The driver led her through security that waved them past without question, down a hallway that opened onto the tarmac where a small jet waited. "Miss Valles?" A flight attendant materialized, young and perfectly groomed. "Welcome aboard. We'll be departing shortly." Mara climbed the stairs on numb legs. The cabin was intimate, luxurious in a way that made her skin crawl. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, the kind of casual wealth that didn't announce itself because it didn't have to. She took a seat near the window and buckled herself in with shaking hands. The flight attendant brought her water in a crystal glass. "It's about 10 hours to New York," she said with a professional smile. "Please let me know if you need anything." What Mara needed was answers, explanations, some sense of what she was walking into. Instead, she got altitude and silence. She watched Brazil disappear beneath clouds, watched the ocean spread blue and endless below, tried not to think about what waited on the other end of this flight. The father who'd abandoned her, the family that had pretended she didn't exist, the sister, half-sister, who was dead. What did they want from her? Why now, after all these years of nothing? The questions chased each other in circles until exhaustion finally dragged her under into uneasy sleep. Mara woke to the attendant's gentle touch on her shoulder. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes, Miss Velez." She straightened, disoriented, and looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Below, a sprawling city came into focus. Manhattan's distinctive skyline, the geometric precision of streets and buildings, the veins of bridges spanning dark water. New York. Her stomach knotted. The landing was smooth. Another car waited on the tarmac, this one even larger than the first. A different driver, same silent efficiency. He loaded the small bag she'd brought, her only bag, containing 2 changes of clothes and her mother's photograph, and held the door open. They drove into the city as night fell, skyscrapers rising like tombstones against the darkening sky. The traffic was insane, a symphony of horns and brake lights, so different from Sao Paulo's chaos but equally overwhelming. Mara pressed her face to the window, watching crowds of people moving with purpose, none of them aware that a girl from the favela was passing through their world. The buildings grew taller, more imposing. Then abruptly they broke free of the density, crossing a bridge into what the driver called Westchester County. Here the houses had space around them, set back from manicured lawns behind iron gates. Old money, real money. The car turned onto a private road that wound through trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Then the house appeared. It wasn't a house. It was an estate. Gray stone, 3 stories tall, with wings extending to either side of a central structure that looked like it had been transplanted from some European castle. Lights glowed in tall windows. Formal gardens stretched into darkness on either side. This was where her father lived, where Victoria had grown up. This was the life Mara could have had if James Harrington had chosen to acknowledge her existence. The car stopped at the front entrance. The driver opened her door. "Miss Velez, they're expecting you inside." Mara stepped out onto gravel that crunched beneath her worn shoes. The air here was different, cooler, cleaner, scented with something floral she couldn't name. The front door opened before she reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s wearing a severe black dress. "Miss Velez, I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. Please, follow me." The interior was exactly what Mara had feared. All dark wood and oil paintings, thick carpets that swallowed sound, the kind of accumulated wealth that came from generations of having more than enough. Mrs. Chen led her through a hallway lined with family portraits, faces Mara didn't recognize staring down with bland superiority. They stopped before a set of double doors. Mrs. Chen knocked once, then pushed them open. "Miss Mara Velez," she announced. The room beyond was a study or library, shelves of leather-bound books rising to a high ceiling. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it sat a man Mara recognized from the few photographs her mother had kept, James Harrington. He was older now, gray threading through dark hair, lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes. But the resemblance was unmistakable. She had his nose, his stubborn chin. Looking at him was like seeing a ghost of her own future. He stood as she entered. Beside him was a woman, blonde, elegant, frozen-faced, with grief or Botox or both. Victoria's mother, Mara's father's wife. And there was one other person in the room, a younger man, maybe early 30s, leaning against the bookshelf with his arms crossed. He had sharp features, dark eyes that tracked Mara's entrance with predatory focus. Richard Stanton stepped forward from the corner. "Miss Velez, thank you for coming. May I introduce James Harrington, Mrs. Catherine Harrington?" "And I know who I am," James interrupted. His voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. His eyes locked on Mara's face, and something complicated moved through his expression. "Mara, you look like your mother." "Don't." The word came out harder than Mara intended. She was so tired, strung out on travel and confusion and dread. "Don't talk about her like you have any right. You left us. You left her to raise me alone in poverty while you—" She gestured at the room, at everything it represented. "While you lived like this." Catherine made a small, offended sound. James's jaw tightened. "You have every right to be angry," he said carefully. "I won't pretend otherwise, but we don't have time for that conversation right now. There are urgent matters that require your cooperation." "My cooperation?" Mara laughed, the sound bitter. "Is that what you call flying me here without explanation? Offering to pay my mother's bills like that makes up for 24 years of nothing?" "Your sister is dead," Catherine said sharply. Tears glittered in her eyes, real grief breaking through her composure. "Show some respect." "I never knew her," Mara shot back. "How can I mourn someone who was kept secret from me the same way I was kept secret from her?" "Enough!" The new voice came from the man by the bookshelf. He pushed off the wall, moving into the light, and Mara got her first clear look at him. He was handsome in a dangerous way, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark hair swept back from his forehead. But it was his eyes that made Mara's breath catch. They were cold, assessing, the eyes of someone who saw people as pieces on a board. "We're wasting time," he said. His voice carried an accent Mara couldn't place. Italian, maybe. "Tell her why she's here." James drew a slow breath. "Mara, this is Lucien Moretti. He was engaged to marry Victoria. The wedding was scheduled for next month." Was. Past tense. Mara looked between them, confusion growing. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said to Lucien. But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. The marriage wasn't just personal, Stanton said. His lawyer's voice was smooth, explanatory. It was a strategic alliance between two families. The Harringtons and the Morettis have been negotiating this union for 3 years. Territory, business interests, peace between factions, everything hinged on this marriage. The words were careful, corporate, but Mara heard what lay beneath them. Factions, territory, alliance. You're criminals, she said flatly. All of you. No one denied it. James's face remained impassive. We prefer to think of ourselves as businessmen operating in competitive markets. You're the Mafia. Mara's voice rose. My father is a crime lord, and you were selling my sister off like property to secure some kind of, treaty? Victoria understood her responsibilities, Catherine said coldly. She knew what was expected of her. Did she? Mara shot back. Is that why she's dead? The room went very quiet. Lucien moved closer, his steps deliberate. He stopped a few feet from Mara, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating controlled power. Victoria died in a car accident, he said softly. The official story is mechanical failure. The truth is that someone cut her brake lines. She was murdered because of her engagement to me, because there are people who don't want our families united. Mara's skin went cold. Then you need better security, not... The contract must be fulfilled, James interrupted. Without this marriage, the alliance fails. And if the alliance fails, there will be war. People will die. Territories will burn. Everything we've built will collapse. Then find someone else, Mara said desperately. You have money, power, connections. You are someone else. Lucian's voice cut through her rising panic. You are James Harrington's daughter. You carry his blood. That makes you eligible to fulfill the contract. The words hit her like a physical blow. No. Mara stepped back, shaking her head. No, absolutely not. You can't be serious. Your mother's medical expenses, Stanton said quietly. The experimental treatments that could extend her life, improve her quality of living. They cost approximately $50,000 per month. We're prepared to cover those costs for as long as necessary. Mara's vision blurred. $50,000 per month. The number was incomprehensible. Additionally, Stanton continued, we'll clear all existing debts, provide a comfortable living space for Elena with round-the-clock care, and establish a trust fund in your name. You'll never have to work 3 jobs again. You'll never have to choose between medication and food. You're buying me. The words felt like ash in her mouth. You're trying to buy me like you bought Victoria. We're offering you a choice, James said, a real choice. Marry Lucien, fulfill the contract, and your mother lives in comfort. You live in comfort. Or refuse and return to Sao Paulo. We won't stop you. But we also won't help you. Your mother's condition will continue to deteriorate, and when she's gone, you'll be alone with nothing but regret. That's not a choice, Mara whispered. That's extortion. That's reality. Lucian's voice was matter-of-fact, almost gentle. I won't pretend this is romantic. I won't lie and say I love you, because we both know that would be absurd. But this marriage serves a purpose. It prevents bloodshed. It maintains stability. And in exchange, you get everything you need to save the person you love most. He made it sound so simple, so transactional. Mara looked at her father, at the man who'd abandoned her, who now needed her to clean up his mess. You don't get to do this, she said, voice shaking. You don't get to ignore me for 24 years and then drag me into your criminal empire when it's convenient. You're right, James said quietly. I don't get to do this. I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm asking anyway, because I'm out of options and running out of time. You can hate me forever, Mara. You've earned that. But your mother is innocent, and she's dying. Don't let pride kill her when you have the power to save her. The words found their mark because they were true. Mara thought of her mother's labored breathing, the way Elena smiled even through pain, the strength it took just to get through each day. Thought of all the times she'd lain awake calculating impossible math, trying to figure out how to keep the woman who'd raised her alive for 1 more month, 1 more week, 1 more day. $50,000 a month. Experimental treatments, round-the-clock care. A chance. How long? Her voice came out hoarse. If I agree to this insanity, how long does the marriage have to last? 1 year. Lucien said immediately. After that, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. You'll receive a settlement and your mother's care continues. If you choose to stay, he shrugged, we'll negotiate new terms. I want it in writing, Mara said. Every promise, every detail. And I want my mother moved to the best facility in New York before the wedding. I want to see her settled, safe, and improving before I sign anything. Stanton nodded. That can be arranged. And if I find out any of you lied to me, if my mother's care is threatened or used as leverage after I agree to this, the deal is off and I disappear. You'll never find me again. She had no idea if she could actually make good on that threat, but the words needed to be said. Lucien's mouth curved in something that might have been respect. Acceptable. James moved toward her, hand extended. Mara stared at it like it was a snake. Don't touch me, she said quietly. You lost that right a long time ago. His hand dropped. Mrs. Chen will show you to a guest room, Catherine said, her voice brittle. We'll make arrangements for your mother's transfer tomorrow. The wedding is scheduled for the end of the week. The end of the week? Mara's voice climbed. That's insane. I can't. The timeline is non-negotiable, Lucien said. Every day we delay is another day our enemies have to strike. The wedding happens Saturday. You have 5 days to prepare. 5 days to prepare for a marriage to a stranger. A criminal. A man whose last fiancé had been murdered. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to tear this whole elegant room apart with her bare hands. Instead, she straightened her spine and met Lucien's cold gaze with as much strength as she could summon. Fine, she said. 5 days. But understand something, all of you. I'm doing this for my mother, not for your alliance or your empire or your peace. I'm doing this because she deserves a chance to live without suffering. That's the only reason I'm agreeing. Don't ever forget that. We won't, James said quietly. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway as if summoned. Miss Valez, if you'll follow me. Mara walked out of the room without looking back, spine rigid, hands clenched into fists at her sides. The bedroom misses. Chen letter 2 was bigger than the entire apartment she'd left behind in Sao Paulo. 4-poster bed, antique furniture, a bathroom with marble and gold fixtures. It was beautiful and cold and completely alien. Breakfast is served at 7, Mrs. Chen said. If you need anything during the night, there's a phone on the nightstand. Then she was gone, and Mara was alone. She made it to the bathroom before the shaking started, braced her hands on the marble sink, and stared at her reflection, dark eyes wide with shock, face too pale, hair disheveled from travel. She looked lost, terrified. She looked like exactly what she was, a girl in over her head, drowning in circumstances she couldn't control. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with trembling hands, a text from an unknown number. Your mother has been moved to St. Elizabeth's Medical Center, room 412. She's resting comfortably. Stanton. They'd moved fast, efficiently, like they'd been planning this from the moment they'd made that first phone call. Mara sank onto the edge of the bathtub, phone clutched in both hands. She'd agreed to marry a mobster to save her mother's life. In 5 days, she'd stand in front of witnesses and promise herself to a man she didn't know, didn't trust, might actually fear if she let herself think too hard about the coldness in his eyes. In 5 days, Mara Velez would become Mara Moretti. And once that happened, there would be no going back. She pressed her face into her hands and finally let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the terrible weight of knowing she'd just traded her freedom for her mother's life, and she'd make the same choice again without hesitation. The morning light came harsh through unfamiliar windows, dragging Mara from restless sleep into a reality that felt no less surreal than her nightmares. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of yesterday crashed back with the weight of a collapsing building. She was in New York, in her father's house, and in 5 days she was supposed to marry a stranger. Someone knocked on the door, sharp and efficient. Mrs. Chen entered without waiting for permission, carrying a garment bag and a tray of coffee. Good morning, Miss Velez. Mr. Harrington has arranged for you to visit your mother at 9. Before that, we need to take your measurements. The designer will be here this afternoon for your first fitting. Mara sat up slowly, pushing hair out of her face. Fitting for what? Your wedding dress, of course. Mrs. Chen's expression suggested this should have been obvious. And your wardrobe in general. You'll need appropriate clothing for the events leading up to the ceremony. Right, because the girl from the favela couldn't possibly be seen in her secondhand dress at whatever spectacle they were planning. I don't need, Mara started, but Mrs. Chen was already moving toward the closet, hanging the garment bag with brisk precision. Mr. Moretti was quite specific about his expectations, she said. You are to be presented as his equal, which means dressing the part. Breakfast is waiting downstairs. I suggest you eat before the car arrives. She swept out, leaving Mara alone with the coffee and the growing certainty that she'd signed away more than just her freedom. She'd agreed to become someone else entirely. The coffee was strong and black, nothing like the sweet cafezinho she was used to. She drank it anyway, needing the caffeine, and found clothes laid out for her. Designer jeans that probably cost more than a month's rent. A silk blouse in deep emerald. They fit perfectly, which meant someone had estimated her size. The thought made her skin crawl. Downstairs, the dining room was empty except for James, sitting at the head of a table that could have seated 20. He looked up when she entered, something complicated crossing his face. Mara, please sit. She took a seat as far from him as possible, at the opposite end of the table. A server appeared immediately with plates of food, eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, pastries, enough to feed her entire building back home. They ate in silence for several minutes. Finally, James set down his fork. I know you hate me, he said quietly, and you have every right to. But I want you to understand something. What happened with your mother, leaving her, leaving you? It wasn't because I didn't care. Then why? The question came out harder than Mara intended. Why abandon us if you cared so much? Because I was a coward. His voice was flat, matter of fact. I was young, stupid, building my position in the family. Your mother was a beautiful distraction during a business trip to Sao Paulo. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I had Catherine, I had Victoria on the way, I had responsibilities here. So I sent money for a few years and told myself that was enough, that you were better off without me dragging you into this life. You were right about that last part, Mara said bitterly. I was better off without you. My mother raised me to be honest, to work hard, to survive without depending on anyone. Everything good about me came from her. You gave me nothing but your DNA. James flinched but didn't argue. Elena was remarkable, is remarkable. I'm glad she's getting the care she needs. Don't. Mara's hand tightened on her fork. Don't pretend this is about kindness. You're using her to control me, the same way you're using this whole situation. Nothing about this is generous. It's manipulation. You're not wrong. He met her eyes directly. But that doesn't make the care any less real or any less necessary. Whatever my motivations, your mother will live better and longer because of this arrangement. That matters, doesn't it? It did. That was the hell of it. The car arrived at 8:45, another sleek black vehicle with another silent driver. Mara climbed in, jaw tight with anxiety. St. Elizabeth's Medical Center was in Manhattan, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed money. The kind of place Mara had never imagined her mother could access. A doctor met her in the lobby. Dr. Sarah Chen, young and professional, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Velez, your mother was transferred late last night. She's responded well to the initial treatments. We've already started her on a new medication protocol that should help with the respiratory issues. Already? Mara's voice caught. But it's only been 12 hours. Mr. Harrington was very clear about the urgency, Dr. Chen said gently. We've assembled a team of specialists. Your mother is receiving the best possible care. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, nothing like the crowded public hospital where Mara had spent so many desperate hours. Dr. Chen stopped outside room 412. She's awake, she said. But please keep the visit brief. She needs rest. Mara pushed open the door with shaking hands. The room was private, spacious, filled with late morning light. Medical equipment beeped softly in the background, but it was all state-of-the-art, gleaming and new. And in the bed, propped up against pristine white pillows, was Elena Velez. She looked better, not healthy. The illness had carved too deep for that, but better. Her eyes were clearer, her breathing easier. When she saw Mara, her face transformed with joy. Minha filha, she whispered. My daughter. Mara crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to her knees beside the bed, grabbing her mother's hand. Elena's fingers were thin and cool, but they squeezed back with surprising strength. "Mamãe, how do you feel?" "Like I'm dreaming." Elena's Portuguese was soft, wondering. "They told me I'm in New York, that I'll be staying here for treatment. I don't understand, Mara. How is this possible?" Mara's throat closed. She couldn't tell her mother the truth, couldn't explain that she'd agreed to marry a criminal to pay for this room, these doctors, this chance. Elena would never forgive herself. "I found help," she said carefully. "Someone who can make sure you get the care you need." "Who?" Elena's eyes sharpened despite her weakness. "Mara, what did you do?" "What I had to." Mara pressed a kiss to her mother's knuckles. "Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting stronger, okay? Let the doctors help you." "You're not telling me something." Elena shifted in the bed, trying to sit up straighter. "I know that look. What aren't you saying?" Before Mara could answer, the door opened. James Harrington stepped inside. The color drained from Elena's face. Her hand tightened convulsively around Mara's. "No," she breathed. "No, James. Why are you here?" "Hello, Elena." His voice was careful, controlled. "You're looking well." "Get out!" Elena's voice gained strength, years of buried anger surging to the surface. "You have no right to be here. No right to see her, to see me." "Mama, please." Mara gripped her mother's hand, desperate to calm her before she triggered another attack. "It's okay, I'm handling this." "He called you, didn't he?" Elena's eyes were fierce despite the tears gathering in them. "After all these years of silence, he called you because he needed something. What does he want, Mara? What did he take from you?" "He didn't take anything," Mara lied. The words felt like broken glass in her throat. "He's helping us, that's all." "Nothing with James is ever that simple." Elena looked at him, and the hatred in her gaze was scalding. "You left us with nothing. You promised you'd come back, that you'd help raise her, and then you disappeared. Do you know what that did to her? Growing up wondering why her father didn't want her?" "I know," James said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 24 years, but I can't undo the past, Elena. All I can do is try to help now." "Help?" Elena laughed, the sound bitter and wet. "You're helping yourself. That's all you've ever done. So what is it? What do you need from my daughter that's worth buying your way back into our lives?" The silence stretched too long. Mara watched her mother's face change as understanding dawned, watched horror replace anger. "No," Elena whispered. "Tell me you didn't. Tell me you're not dragging her into your world." "It's my choice," Mara said firmly. "My decision, Mamai, not his." "What did you do?" Elena grabbed Mara's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "What did you agree to?" "Elena, you need to stay calm," James said, moving closer. "The doctors said—" "I don't care what the doctors said." Elena's voice rose, sharp with panic. "Mara, answer me. What did you promise him?" Mara couldn't lie to her mother's face. Not about this. "His daughter died," she said slowly. "My half-sister. She was engaged to be married, some kind of alliance between families. The agreement still needs to be fulfilled, so I'm going to fulfill it." The beeping of the monitors accelerated. Elena's breathing turned ragged. "You're marrying someone for him." It wasn't a question. Elena's eyes filled with tears that spilled over, tracking down her thin cheeks. "You're selling yourself to save me." "I'm making a choice to help you," Mara corrected gently. "There's a difference." "No." Elena was crying openly now, shaking her head. "No, minha filha, you can't do this. I won't let you sacrifice your life for mine. I'm old. I'm sick. I'm dying anyway." "Don't say that." Mara's own tears started, hot and fierce. "You're not dying. Not anymore. The doctors here can help you. They have treatments. You just need to let them work. Please, Mamai. Please let me do this." "James, stop this." Elena looked past Mara, her voice breaking. "I'm begging you. Whatever you need from her, whatever twisted plan you have, end it. Let her go home. I'll die knowing she's free. That's all I want." "I can't do that," James said, and he actually sounded pained. "I wish I could, Elena. But there are consequences beyond just our family. If this alliance fails, people will die. Many people." Then let them die. Elena's voice cracked with desperation. Let your whole corrupt empire burn, I don't care. She's my daughter, she's innocent, you can't just… Mrs. Velez, you need to calm down. Doctor. Chen had appeared in the doorway, her expression alarmed. Your heart rate is dangerously elevated. I don't care. Elena tried to sit up fully, gasping with the effort. I won't let him do this. I won't. Mamai, please. Mara pressed her mother back against the pillows, tears streaming down her own face now. Please don't fight this. I need you to get better. I need you alive and safe and healthy. That's worth anything. Don't you understand? You're worth anything. Not this, Elena sobbed. Not your freedom. Not your future. My future is making sure you have one. Mara pressed her forehead against her mother's hand. I love you. Everything I'm doing because I love you. So please, just trust me. Let me handle this my way. Dr. Chen moved to the IV stand, adjusting something. Within seconds, Elena's breathing began to slow, her eyes growing heavy. Sedative, the doctor said quietly. She needs rest, not stress. Mara. Elena's voice was fading, slurred by medication. Don't let them break you. I won't, Mara whispered. I promise. Her mother's eyes closed, her grip on Mara's hand loosening as sleep claimed her. Mara stayed kneeling by the bed, watching Elena's chest rise and fall with easier breaths than she'd managed in months. Dr. Chen checked the monitors, made notes on a tablet. You should go, she said gently to Mara. Let her sleep. You can visit again tomorrow. Mara stood on shaking legs, reluctant to leave, but knowing the doctor was right. She turned to find James still standing by the door, his face carefully blank. They walked to the elevator in silence. Only when the doors closed, sealing them in together, did he speak. She's right, you know. Your mother. This is wrong. Mara laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Now you develop a conscience? After I've already agreed? I'm just saying you don't have to go through with it. We'll still take care of Elena. I'll make sure of that. But you could walk away, Mara. Get on a plane, go back to your life. And then what? She rounded on him. You think Lucien Moretti will just shrug and let it go? You think the people who killed Victoria won't come after me next? I'm not stupid, James. The moment I stepped on that plane, the moment I heard about this arrangement, I became part of this whether I wanted to or not. Walking away doesn't make me safe. It just makes me an enemy. He was quiet for a moment. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I had to be, Mara said bitterly. I didn't have money, or power, or family connections, just my brain and my survival instinct. So don't insult me by pretending I have a choice I don't actually have. The elevator opened onto the lobby. The same black car waited outside. Where to now? Mara asked as they settled into the back seat. More indoctrination into my new life? Actually, Lucien wants to see you. He's sending a car to pick you up at noon. Mara's stomach dropped. Why? He didn't say, but I'd suggest not keeping him waiting. Lucien Moretti is many things, but patient isn't one of them. They drove back to the estate in silence. Mara went to her room and found it transformed. The closet now full of expensive clothes in her size, the dresser topped with designer makeup and perfume. Someone had unpacked her small bag and tucked it away somewhere, erasing the last physical evidence of her old life. She had just enough time to change into a simple black dress, one of many now hanging in the closet, before Mrs. Chen knocked to tell her the car had arrived. This car was different, sleeker, more aggressive, with windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. The driver who opened her door was younger than the others, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and eyes that tracked her every movement. Miss Velez, Mr. Moretti is waiting. The drive took them deeper into the city, into neighborhoods that grew progressively more industrial. They finally stopped in front of what looked like an old warehouse, brick and steel with narrow windows. Not the kind of place Mara had expected. The scarred driver led her inside, through a maze of corridors that smelled of concrete and machine oil, until they reached a freight elevator. It lurched upward with a groan of old gears. The top floor was nothing like the industrial exterior suggested. Someone had converted it into a massive loft, open concept, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in shades of gray and black. Expensive art hung on exposed brick walls. And standing by the windows, back to the door, was Lucien Moretti. He turned when she entered, and Mara's breath caught despite herself. In the harsh light of day, he was even more striking, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Mara. He dismissed the driver with a gesture, waiting until the elevator doors closed before speaking again. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? No. A slight smile touched his mouth. But I appreciate you pretending otherwise. Would you like something to drink? Wine? Water? Water. Her throat was dry, her nerves stretched too tight. He moved to a bar area, poured water from a crystal pitcher into 2 glasses, brought one to her, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. The touch was brief but deliberate. Sit. He gestured to a leather sofa. Please. Mara perched on the edge, spine straight, ready to bolt. Lucien settled into an armchair across from her, studying her with those cold, assessing eyes. You saw your mother this morning. Yes. And? And she's getting the treatment she needs. Mara's grip tightened on the glass. Though she's not happy about the cost. She knows then. About our arrangement. She knows enough. Mara met his gaze directly. She's not stupid. Neither am I. So if you brought me here to threaten me or intimidate me or whatever power play you have planned, just get it over with. Lucien's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? He leaned back, considering her. Tell me, Mara, what do you know about me? You're a criminal. You run some kind of syndicate. You were engaged to my half-sister and someone killed her because of it. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Syndicate is such a harsh word, he said mildly. I prefer to think of myself as an entrepreneur in highly competitive markets. Import-export, mostly. Some real estate development. Investments in various industries. Is that what you call it? Mara couldn't keep the edge from her voice. My father uses the same corporate euphemisms. You're the Mafia, Lucien. Own it or don't, but don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Fair enough. Yes, I operate outside legal boundaries. I've built an empire on violence and intimidation and strategic brutality. I've killed people, Mara. Personally. With these hands. He spread his fingers, examining them like they were interesting artifacts. Does that frighten you? It should have. It absolutely should have. But Mara had grown up in the favela, where violence was a daily reality, where the wrong look at the wrong person could get you killed. She understood predators, and she knew showing fear to one was the worst possible move. Should it? She asked quietly. Frighten me, I mean. Are you planning to hurt me? No. The answer was immediate, definitive. You are going to be my wife. That makes you untouchable. Anyone who harms you, anyone who even threatens you will die screaming. That's not a promise, Mara. It's a guarantee. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sent ice down her spine because they weren't about protection. They were about ownership. Why did you really bring me here? She asked. Lucien stood, moving to the windows. Because in 3 days you're going to stand beside me in front of 500 people, family, associates, enemies watching for weakness. You're going to pledge yourself to me, and they're all going to know it's a replacement arrangement, that you're not Victoria. Some will see that as an insult. Others will see it as an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To test me. To see if I'll protect a bride I barely know with the same ferocity I would have protected the one I chose. He turned back to face her. Victoria and I were engaged for 3 years. We knew each other, had built understanding, if not love. You and I are strangers. That creates vulnerability. Mara's hands were shaking. She set down the water glass before she dropped it. Then what do you want from me? Cooperation. Lucien moved closer, stopping just in front of her. I need you to stand beside me at that altar and look like you want to be there. Not happy, necessarily. No one would believe that. But willing, chosen. Mine by more than just contract. I can't fake emotions I don't feel. I'm not asking you to fake anything. He crouched in front of her, bringing them eye to eye. I'm asking you to survive. Because the moment we're married, every enemy I have will look at you and see leverage. The only thing that will keep you alive is their belief that harming you would unleash something they can't survive. And for them to believe that, you need to belong to me, completely, visibly, without question. The words were clinical, strategic. But there was something else in his voice, something Mara couldn't quite identify. "What happened to Victoria?" she asked. "Really?" Lucian's jaw tightened. "She tried to run. 2 weeks before the wedding, she got scared and decided to disappear. Made it as far as the Lincoln Tunnel before they caught her." "They? Your people?" "No." His voice went flat, dangerous. "My enemies. The ones who don't want this alliance to succeed. They killed her and staged it as an accident to send a message. That even Harrington's daughter wasn't safe. That I couldn't protect what was mine." Mara's throat closed. "And you think they'll come after me too?" "I know they will." Lucian stood, offering her his hand. "Which is why I'm going to teach you how to survive in my world. How to spot threats. How to move through crowds. How to know who to trust. You have 3 days. I suggest you pay attention." She looked at his outstretched hand, broad palm, long fingers, the hands that had killed people, hands that were now offering her the closest thing to protection she was likely to get in this nightmare. Mara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "Good," Lucian said. "Now, let's start with the basics. Who in your father's household can you trust?" "No one." "Wrong." He moved to a desk, pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Chen has worked for the Harringtons for 30 years. She's loyal to the family, which now includes you. The head of security, Marcus Reeves, is on James's payroll, but he's practical. He'll protect you because it serves his interests. The driver who brought you here, Anton, is my man. He'll be assigned to you full-time after the wedding." He spread photographs across the desk, faces Mara didn't recognize. "These are the primary threats. Dmitry Volkov runs the Russian operations in Brooklyn. He's the most likely candidate for ordering Victoria's death. Careful, methodical, no conscience. His daughter Irina will be at the wedding. She'll smile and congratulate you and fantasize about putting a bullet in your skull." He pointed to another photo. Carlos Mendoza, Colombian cartel representative. He wanted Victoria for himself, saw the Moretti-Harrington alliance as a threat to his territory. He'll be watching you, looking for weaknesses. More photographs. More enemies. More people who wanted her dead for crimes she hadn't committed, alliances she'd never chosen. "How am I supposed to remember all this?" Mara's head was spinning. "You will." Lucian gathered the photos. "Because your life depends on it. We'll go through these every day until the wedding. By Saturday, you'll know every face, every threat, every potential danger." He pulled out another set of photos. These ones showed the estate, various rooms and corridors marked with X's and notes. "Security weaknesses in your father's house. The East Wing has blind spots in camera coverage. The service entrance is poorly guarded between midnight and 4 a.m. Your bedroom window can be accessed from the garden if someone knows the security codes." He tapped each location. "Don't use the East Wing alone. Don't answer the door after midnight. Keep your window locked always." "This is insane," Mara whispered. "This is reality." Lucian's voice gentled slightly. "I'm not trying to terrify you, Mara. I'm trying to keep you alive. Knowledge is the best weapon you have right now. Use it." They spent the next 3 hours going through protocols, faces, security procedures. Lucian was patient but relentless, quizzing her repeatedly until she could identify threats on sight, until she knew which exits to use in various scenarios, until she understood the hierarchy of power and danger in the world she was entering. By the time Anton returned to drive her back to the estate, Mara's head was pounding and her nerves were frayed to breaking. But she also felt something unexpected, a grim kind of determination. If she was going to survive this, she needed to be smart, needed to learn everything Lucian could teach her, needed to stop being a victim and start being a player in this deadly game. The next 2 days blurred together in a chaos of preparation. Dress fittings with a designer who spoke in rapid-fire French and treated Mara like a living mannequin. Hours with Lucian reviewing security protocols and potential threats. Meetings with a woman named Grace who coached her on how to stand, how to speak, how to present herself as someone worthy of being Lucian Moretti's wife. "Chin up," Grace said for the 100th time. "You're not begging for acceptance. You're conferring honor by your presence. Act like it." Mara wanted to scream that she didn't feel honorable, She felt terrified and furious and trapped. But she bit her tongue and straightened her spine and practiced the cool, distant expression that Grace insisted she needed. She visited her mother each morning, watching Elena grow stronger under the aggressive treatment protocol. The doctors were pleased with her progress, talking about lung function improvements and reduced inflammation. But Elena watched Mara with sad, knowing eyes. "You don't have to do this," she said on the third morning, her voice still weak but clearer than before. "Yes, I do," Mara said gently. "And we both know it." Elena caught her hand. "Then promise me something. Promise me you won't let them destroy who you are. You are strong, Minafila, stronger than any of them. Don't let that strength become cruelty. Don't let survival turn you into something you hate." The words stayed with Mara as the wedding day approached with horrifying speed. She lay awake the night before, staring at the ceiling of her borrowed room, wondering how the hell she'd ended up here, about to marry a killer to save her mother's life, wondering if she'd recognize herself when this was over, wondering if survival was worth the cost of losing who she used to be. The dawn came gray and cold, seeping through the windows like a threat. Mara rose and showered, her movements mechanical. By 7, the room was full of people. Stylists, makeup artists, Grace overseeing everything with military precision. They painted and primped and dressed her in silence, transforming the girl from the favela into something unrecognizable. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace, elegant and expensive, designed to make her look like she belonged in this world of wealth and violence. When they finally turned her toward the mirror, Mara didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked beautiful, powerful, exactly like the kind of woman who could stand beside Lucien Moretti and not flinch. She looked nothing like herself. "Perfect," Grace murmured. "You look perfect." Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "The car is ready. It's time." Mara's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, hiding them in the folds of her dress. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. In less than an hour, she would become Mara Moretti, would bind herself to a man she barely knew, in front of people who wanted her dead, for reasons that had nothing to do with love, and everything to do with power. "Miss Valles," Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle. "We need to go." Mara took one last look at the stranger in the mirror, at the beautiful lie she was about to become. Then she lifted her chin, straightened her spine, and walked toward the door, toward the altar, toward the man who was about to become her husband, toward a future she couldn't predict and couldn't escape. The church was older than the crime families that now filled its pews, a Gothic monument of stone and stained glass that had witnessed generations of bloodshed disguised as devotion. Mara sat in the back of the limousine watching it loom closer, her pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Mrs. Chen sat across from her, face impassive. "Remember what Grace taught you. Head high, shoulders back. You're not a victim walking to execution. You're a bride claiming her place." But Mara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but her throat was too tight, her lungs too constricted by the corset beneath her dress. The car stopped at the entrance. Through the tinted window, she could see a crowd gathered on the steps. Photographers, security, curious onlookers kept at a distance by men in dark suits with suspicious bulges under their jackets. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a spectacle. A performance for an audience that would judge every breath she took. The door opened. Anton stood there, scarred face expressionless, offering his hand. "Miss Velez, they're ready for you." Mara stepped out into cold morning air that bit through the thin silk of her dress. Camera flashes exploded like gunfire, blinding and disorienting. She froze on the top step, overwhelmed by the noise and light and the sheer weight of what was about to happen. Then James appeared beside her, offering his arm. "I know I don't deserve this," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "But will you let me walk you down the aisle?" Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to spit in his face and walk herself down that aisle, proving she didn't need him or anyone. But Grace's voice echoed in her head, "You're conferring honor by your presence." And making James Harrington publicly acknowledge her as his daughter, making him escort her to this marriage he'd forced her into, felt like the smallest victory she could claim. "Fine," she said flatly. "But don't mistake this for forgiveness." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I wouldn't dream of it." They entered through massive oak doors that groaned like dying men. The interior was cavernous, lit by thousands of candles that turned the space into something both beautiful and ominous. The pews were packed with people in expensive clothes, faces she'd studied in photographs, enemies and allies sitting side by side in forced civility. Everyone turned to look at her. The weight of their stares was physical, pressing down on her shoulders, her chest, making it hard to breathe. Mara could feel their assessment, their judgment, their speculation. Who was this girl from nowhere? What made her worthy to replace Victoria Harrington? How long before she cracked under pressure? She lifted her chin and met their gazes with all the defiance she could summon. The organ swelled into the wedding march, and James began walking her down the aisle. Each step felt endless. Mara kept her eyes fixed forward, toward the altar where Lucien waited. He stood perfectly still, wearing a black suit that looked like it cost more than her mother's hospital stay. Dark hair swept back from his face. His expression was unreadable, those cold eyes tracking her approach with predatory focus. She recognized faces as she passed. Dmitry Volkov sitting with military posture, his daughter Irina beside him in ice blue silk, blonde and beautiful, and watching Mara with undisguised contempt. Carlos Mendoza 3 rows back, his handsome face arranged in a pleasant smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Others she'd memorized from Lucien's photos, crime lords and syndicate leaders, all gathered to witness this alliance, all waiting to see if she'd stumble. She didn't. James delivered her to the altar and stepped back without a word. Mara stood alone for a heartbeat before Lucien moved closer, offering his hand. She took it, his grip warm and steady, and let him guide her up the steps to where the priest waited. Father Michael was old, his face mapped with wrinkles, his eyes kind but knowing. This wasn't his first criminal wedding, probably wasn't even his 100th. He'd learned long ago not to ask questions about the unions he blessed. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying through the vast space, "we are gathered here today to witness the joining of Lucien Moretti and Mara Velez in holy matrimony." The words washed over her, familiar and meaningless. This wasn't holy. There was nothing sacred about a marriage built on coercion and strategy. But she stood silent as the priest droned through the traditional ceremony, acutely aware of Lucien beside her, of the 500 people watching from the pews, of the cameras recording every moment. "If anyone present can show just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage," Father Michael intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the whisper of fabric as people shifted in their seats. Mara found herself holding her breath, some irrational part of her hoping someone would object, would give her an escape from this nightmare. No one spoke. "Then we proceed," the priest continued. "Lucien Moretti, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Lucien's voice was strong, certain, carrying to every corner of the church. Father Michael turned to Mara. "Mara Velez, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" This was it, the moment of commitment, the point of no return. Mara looked at Lucien, really looked at him, searching for something. She didn't even know what. Kindness? Regret? Some sign that this was as wrong for him as it was for her? His expression remained impassive, but his thumb moved slightly against her palm, a tiny gesture of what might have been reassurance or warning. She thought of her mother, breathing easily in a clean hospital bed, thought of the experimental treatments, the specialists, the chance at real recovery, thought of the alternative, watching Elena suffocate slowly while Mara worked herself to death trying to buy one more day. "I do," she said clearly, and felt the cage door slam shut. The priest smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Lucien turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But there was nowhere to go, no escape, so Mara stood still and let him kiss her. His lips were warm, firm, tasting faintly of coffee and mint. The kiss was chaste, appropriate for the audience, but there was an undercurrent of possession in it that made Mara's stomach flip. When he pulled back, his eyes held a promise she couldn't decipher. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Michael announced, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Lucian Moretti. Applause erupted through the church, polite and measured. Lucian tucked Mara's hand into the crook of his elbow and led her back down the aisle, past the faces she'd memorized, past enemies wearing friendly masks, past her father standing alone in the front pew, watching with something that might have been guilt or regret. The doors opened and they stepped out into chaos. Photographers surged forward despite the security line, cameras clicking in a frenzy. Questions were shouted in multiple languages. Lucian ignored them all, guiding Mara toward a waiting car. Not the limousine she'd arrived in, but a sleek black sedan with reinforced panels and bulletproof glass. Anton held the door open. Sir, Mrs. Moretti, the reception venue is secure. Mrs. Moretti. The name landed like a stone in Mara's chest. They slid into the back seat and the door sealed them away from the noise. The car pulled out smoothly, security vehicles falling into formation around them. Mara watched the church recede through the rear window, watched the crowd scatter, watched her old life disappear with every meter they traveled. You did well, Lucien said. His hand rested on her knee, warm through the silk. I know that wasn't easy. Mara turned to face him. Don't pretend you care about easy. You got what you wanted, a compliant bride who didn't make a scene. Is that what you think I wanted? Something flickered in his eyes. Compliance? Isn't it? He studied her for a long moment. What I want is survival, for both of us. Everything else is negotiable. The reception was held at an estate even larger than James's, a sprawling compound with guards at every entrance and snipers on the roof that Lucian pointed out casually as they arrived. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, gold leaf molding, French doors opening onto manicured gardens. Tables had been arranged in a horseshoe around a central dance floor, each one draped in white linen and decorated with elaborate floral centerpieces. 500 people. 500 criminals and their families, all dressed in their finest, all smiling and offering congratulations while calculating how this marriage shifted the balance of power. Mara and Lucian entered to applause, were escorted to a head table on a raised platform. From here, Mara could see everything, every face, every gesture, every whispered conversation. It was strategic, she realized. Lucian wanted to observe his guests as much as they wanted to observe him. The first hour was a blur of toasts and speeches. James stood and offered words about family and alliance that made Mara want to throw her champagne glass at his head. Catherine spoke briefly about Victoria's memory, her voice breaking in a way that actually seemed genuine. Various syndicate leaders rose to pledge their support, their words careful and coded. Then the dancing began. Lucien stood and offered Mara his hand. Traditional first dance. Everyone will be watching. They've been watching all day, Mara muttered, but she took his hand and let him lead her to the dance floor. The orchestra began something slow and classical. Lucien's hand settled at her waist, warm through the silk, his other hand clasping hers. They began to move, and Mara realized with surprise that he was an excellent dancer, leading her smoothly through steps she barely knew. Relax, he said quietly. You're stiff as a board. Because I'm terrified, she hissed back. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly comfortable with all this. I noticed. His thumb traced a small circle against her waist. But you're doing fine. Better than fine. Half the women in this room are jealous of how well you carry yourself. The other half want me dead. That too. He spun her gently. Focus on me. Forget about them. That's impossible when... She stumbled slightly, distracted. Lucien's grip tightened, steadying her, pulling her closer until they were nearly chest to chest. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Better? He asked. Mara's heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. Whatever you feel is fine. His voice was surprisingly gentle. There's no script for this, Mara. We're making it up as we go. The song ended. Polite applause rippled through the room. Other couples joined them on the floor, and suddenly Mara was being passed from partner to partner in some ritual she hadn't been warned about. First James, who held her stiffly and said nothing. Then Dmitri Volkov, whose smile didn't reach his cold blue eyes. You're very beautiful, he said in accented English. A worthy replacement for Victoria. I'm not a replacement, Mara said coolly. I'm myself. Of course, his smile widened. My apologies. I simply meant that Lucien is fortunate in his choice of bride. It wasn't his choice. It was a contract. Ah, but all marriages are contracts, are they not? Some are simply more honest about the terms. He spun her professionally. Tell me, Mrs. Moretti, do you know how to shoot a gun? The question was so unexpected that Mara almost tripped. What? A gun? Lucien's wife should know how to protect herself, don't you think? Especially given what happened to the last girl who wore that ring. His eyes dropped meaningfully to the diamond on her left hand, Victoria's ring, resized to fit her smaller finger. Ice slid down Mara's spine. Is that a threat? It's advice, Dmitri said pleasantly. From someone who has survived a long time in this world. Learn to defend yourself, Mrs. Moretti, because the men who love you cannot always be there to save you. The song ended, and he released her with a small bow, leaving Mara shaken. Before she could retreat back to the safety of the head table, another man appeared. Carlos Mendoza, handsome and dangerous in equal measure. May I? He didn't wait for permission, already pulling her into dance position. I wanted to offer my personal congratulations. Lucien is a lucky man. Everyone keeps saying that. Mara tried to put distance between them, but he held her firmly. I'm starting to wonder if anyone actually believes it. I believe he's lucky you agreed to this arrangement rather than fighting it. Carlos's eyes were dark and assessing. A woman with your spirit could have caused significant problems. Instead, you chose pragmatism. That's admirable. I chose survival. Same thing, in our world. He guided her through a turn. Tell me, does Lucien treat you well? Behind closed doors, I mean. The personal question crossed a line. That's none of your business. Perhaps not, but if you ever find yourself unhappy in this marriage, if you ever need an alternative. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. I would be happy to provide sanctuary. Mara pulled back sharply. I don't need sanctuary, and I definitely don't need whatever you're offering. Carlos's smile turned cold. No? Give it time, Mrs. Moretti. Lucien has many admirable qualities, but gentleness isn't among them. When he inevitably shows you his true nature, remember that you have options. The song ended mercifully. Mara turned to leave, but Carlos caught her wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. One more thing, he said softly. Victoria tried to run. She thought she could escape this life, start over somewhere safe. They found her body in the Hudson 3 days later. Just something to keep in mind if you ever get similar ideas. He released her and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Mara stood frozen on the dance floor, heart hammering, Carlos's words echoing in her head. Victoria's body in the Hudson. But Lucien had said she died in a car accident, that her brakes were cut. Which story was true? Or were both lies hiding something worse? Mara. Lucien appeared at her elbow, his expression tight. Are you all right? You look pale. I need air, she managed. Please. He didn't ask questions, just guided her through the French doors onto the garden terrace. The night air was cold but welcome, clearing some of the fog from her head. Mara gripped the stone balustrade, trying to steady herself. What did Carlos say to you? Lucien's voice was quiet but edged with steel. He told me Victoria's body was found in the Hudson, but you said car accident. Which one of you is lying? Lucien was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Both stories are true, in a way. Victoria's car was forced off the road into the river. By the time we recovered her body, she'd been underwater for days. The official story, mechanical failure, was designed to avoid panic, to keep our enemies from knowing they'd successfully struck at us. So she was murdered. Mara turned to face him. Just like you said. But you left out the part about the river. Would knowing that detail have changed your decision? I don't know. Mara's hands were shaking again. Maybe. Probably not. But I deserve the truth, Lucien. If I'm risking my life for this alliance, I deserve to know exactly what I'm up against. You're right. He moved closer, his presence solid and warm in the cold night. I should have told you everything. I'm sorry." The apology surprised her. She hadn't expected contrition from a man like him. "Carlos also offered me sanctuary," she said, watching Lucien's face. "Said if I ever wanted to leave you, he'd help me disappear." Lucien's expression went cold, dangerous. "Did he? Is he the one who killed Victoria?" "I don't know yet. Carlos, Dimitri, half a dozen others had motive. Until I know for certain I can't move against any of them without triggering the war this marriage is supposed to prevent." His jaw clenched. "But I will find out who gave the order, and when I do, they'll wish they'd died in the womb." The viciousness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Mara felt a strange sort of relief. At least his rage was honest, unfiltered by the corporate euphemisms everyone else used. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About Victoria. I know you cared about her." "I respected her," Lucien corrected. "We had an understanding. It wasn't love, but it was partnership. And she didn't deserve to die because powerful men couldn't control their ambitions." He turned to look out over the gardens, his profile sharp against the lit windows behind them. Mara studied him, this man who was now her husband, this killer who'd shown her more honesty in 5 minutes than her own father had in 24 years. "What happens now?" she asked. "After tonight?" "We maintain the facade. You move into my apartment, we're seen together publicly, we convince everyone that this marriage is real and stable." He glanced at her. "And we survive long enough to figure out who wants us dead and eliminate the threat." Just like that. Just like that. A slight smile touched his mouth. "Welcome to married life, Mrs. Moretti." A commotion inside drew their attention. Through the French doors, Mara could see people moving urgently, security personnel speaking into radios, guests standing and craning to see what was happening. Lucien's hand went to his waist, where Mara suddenly realized he was carrying a gun under his jacket. "Stay behind me." They moved back inside together. Anton was pushing through the crowd toward them, his scarred face grim. "Sir, we have a situation. Someone left a package at the entrance. Security opened it." He handed Lucien a phone showing a photograph. Mara caught a glimpse of the screen and felt bile rise in her throat. The package contained a bridal veil, white silk soaked in what looked like blood, and a note in stark black letters. "One down, one to go." Lucien's face went cold as stone. He handed the phone back to Anton. "Lockdown. No one leaves until we've identified everyone present. I want security footage from every entrance, every camera pulled and reviewed. Find out who delivered that package and where they went." "Yes, sir." Anton moved away, already speaking into his radio. The room had gone quiet, guests whispering nervously as security personnel took positions at all exits. Lucien turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying easily over the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a minor security concern. As a precaution, we're asking everyone to remain here while we verify that all guests are accounted for. This should take no more than 30 minutes. Please, enjoy the food and drink. We apologize for the inconvenience." His tone was calm, authoritative, giving no indication of the threat that had just been delivered. But Mara could feel the tension radiating from him, could see the predatory alertness in his eyes as he scanned the crowd. Someone here had delivered that message. Someone in this room wanted her dead. James appeared at Lucien's elbow, his face tight. "What the hell happened?" "Someone made their position clear." Lucien showed him the photograph. "The question is who?" "Dimitri," James said immediately. "It has to be. He's the only one bold enough to strike at a wedding. Or smart enough to make it look like Dimitri while actually being someone else." Lucien pocketed his phone. "We're not jumping to conclusions, not yet." "My daughter just received a death threat," James said, voice rising. "At her own wedding. We need to respond. We need to be smart," Lucien cut him off sharply. "Overreacting is exactly what they want. It creates chaos, breaks the alliance, starts the war. I won't give them that satisfaction." Mara watched them argue, feeling strangely detached. Someone wanted her dead. The word should have terrified her, should have sent her into panic. But she'd grown up in the favela, where death was always one wrong step away. This was just a different kind of danger, dressed in expensive clothes. She slipped away while they were distracted, moving through the crowd toward the ladies' room. She needed a moment alone, needed to process everything without Lucien or James hovering over her. The bathroom was mercifully empty, all marble and gold fixtures. Mara locked herself in a stall and pressed her hands against the cold walls, breathing deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. The door opened. Footsteps on marble, then silence. "Mrs. Moretti?" A woman's voice, accented, Russian. "Are you in here?" Mara froze. Through the gap in the stall door, she could see Irina Volkov checking her makeup in the mirror, her blonde hair perfect, her ice blue dress pristine. "I know you're here," Irina continued conversationally. "I saw you come in. I just wanted to have a private conversation. Woman to woman." Every instinct screamed at Mara to stay silent, stay hidden, but hiding would make her look weak, and weakness, in this world, was a death sentence. She unlocked the stall and stepped out. "What do you want?" Irina turned, her smile sharp. "To offer my condolences. It must be difficult stepping into a dead woman's shoes. Wearing her ring, sleeping in her bed, marrying her man." "Victoria and I never met," Mara said carefully. "I'm not replacing her. I'm fulfilling a contract." "How pragmatic." Irina pulled out a lipstick, reapplying it with practiced precision. "Tell me, do you love him, Lucien?" "That's none of your business." "I'll take that as a no." Irina capped the lipstick, meeting Mara's eyes in the mirror. "Good. Love makes you weak in this world. Better to stay detached. Keep your heart locked away where it can't be used against you." "Is that what you do?" "It's how I've survived 26 years in my father's empire without becoming a victim." Irina turned to face her directly. "You seem smart, Mara. Smarter than Victoria, at least. She was soft, sheltered, unprepared for the realities of this life. You're different. You've seen real poverty, real struggle. That gives you an advantage. But if this is supposed to be encouraging, you're doing a terrible job." Irina laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. "I'm not trying to encourage you. I'm trying to warn you. That message tonight, the bloody veil, it's just the beginning. Whoever killed Victoria will come for you next. They have to prove Lucian can't protect his bride. And when they do, you need to be ready." She reached into her clutch and pulled out something small, pressing it into Mara's hand. A business card with nothing but a phone number. "If you ever need help," Irina said quietly, "real help, not the kind you can ask your husband or father for, call me." "Why would you help me?" "Your father might be the one who sent that threat." "My father is many things, but he's not stupid enough to strike at a wedding he attended personally. Too obvious." Irina moved toward the door, then paused. "I'm offering because I know what it's like to be trapped in this life. And sometimes, the only people who can understand are other women caught in the same cage." She left, her heels clicking away down the marble hallway. Mara looked down at the card in her hand, then slipped it into her bra, the only place she could hide it. She didn't trust Irina, didn't trust anyone in this room. But having options, having a potential lifeline, might be the difference between survival and ending up in the Hudson like Victoria. When she returned to the ballroom, security was already releasing guests in controlled groups, verifying identities before allowing anyone to leave. Lucien stood with Anton and several other men, reviewing footage on a tablet. He looked up when Mara approached, something easing in his expression. "There you are. I was about to send someone to find you." "I just needed a moment." She glanced at the tablet. "Did you find anything?" The package was delivered by a courier service, paid in cash. No security footage of who placed the order. Professional work. His jaw tightened. Whoever did this knew how to cover their tracks. The rest of the evening was tense. Guests departing in clusters under heavy security, everyone whispering about the threat and what it meant. By midnight, the ballroom was empty except for staff cleaning up and a core group of Lucien's most trusted people. James approached as Mara was gathering the small bouquet she'd carried down the aisle. "I'm doubling security at the estate. You should stay there tonight, where I can protect you." "She's staying with me," Lucien said flatly. "She's my wife. My responsibility." "Your wife who just received a death threat," James shot back. "Maybe your protection isn't as effective as you think." "Enough!" Mara's voice cut through their argument. "I'm not a child you can fight over. I'm going with Lucien because that's what we agreed to, what the contract requires. But don't pretend either of you is doing this for my benefit. You're protecting your investment." She walked past both of them toward the exit, where Anton waited with the car. Lucien caught up to her, his hand light on her elbow. You didn't have to defend me back there. I wasn't defending you. I was stating facts. She let him help her into the car, the dress pooling around her like water. Where are we going? My apartment in the city. It's secure and we can control who has access. He slid in beside her and Anton closed the door. Tomorrow we'll discuss long-term security arrangements. Tonight, you just need to rest. The drive was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Mara watched the city lights blur past, thinking about bloody veils and death threats and a dead girl at the bottom of the Hudson, thinking about the card hidden against her heart and the woman who'd offered help with knowing eyes. Thinking about the fact that she was now married to a man who killed people with his bare hands, and that might be the only thing keeping her alive. The apartment was in a sleek high-rise in Tribeca, the top 3 floors accessible only by private elevator. Anton accompanied them up, doing a security sweep before leaving them alone. Mara stood in the center of the living room, taking in the masculine decor, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the open-plan kitchen gleaming with unused appliances. This was Lucien's space, his territory, and now somehow it was supposed to be hers too. Your room is down that hallway, Lucien said, pointing. Second door on the right. Your clothes have already been moved there, and there's a bathroom en suite. My room is at the opposite end of the apartment. We won't be sharing space unless you choose to. The clarification should have been reassuring. Instead, it just emphasized how transactional this all was. Thank you, Mara said quietly. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. The security code for the elevator is changed daily. I'll text it to you each morning. Don't open the door for anyone unless I've cleared them first. He loosened his tie, suddenly looking tired. I know this isn't what you wanted. The marriage, the threats, any of it, but I meant what I said earlier. I will keep you safe, Mara, whatever it takes. Even though I'm just a replacement? A contract fulfilled? Lucien crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're not a replacement. You're your own person, with your own strength and your own value. Victoria was Victoria. You're Mara. Don't ever confuse the two. His intensity caught her off guard. Mara found herself unable to look away from his dark eyes, from the fierce conviction in his voice. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be your wife, how to survive in your world. I'm terrified I'm going to make a mistake that gets me killed. Then we learn together. His hand came up, fingers gentle against her cheek. Because I've never had a wife I didn't choose, who doesn't want to be here, who challenges me at every turn. You think you're the only one out of your depth? The vulnerability and the admission surprised her. She'd thought of Lucien as invincible, untouchable, a predator who never showed weakness. But standing here in the dim light of his apartment, his guard finally down, he looked almost human, almost reachable. I should go to bed, Mara said softly, stepping back before she did something stupid like lean into his touch. It's been a very long day. Of course, Lucien let his hand drop. Sleep well, Mrs. Moretti. She walked down the hallway to her new room, closed the door, and finally let herself collapse against it. Her wedding day was over. She'd survived the ceremony, the reception, the dancing with enemies, the death threat. She'd survived becoming Mara Moretti. But as she looked around the beautiful, impersonal room that was supposed to be hers, as she thought about the bloody veil and Victoria's body in the Hudson and Irina's warning, Mara realized that survival was just the beginning. The real test was still coming, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to pass it. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and Elena's breathing, deeper and easier than it had been in months. Mara sat in the chair beside her mother's bed, watching dawn paint the sky outside in shades of rose and gold. She'd been there for 3 hours, unable to sleep after everything that had happened, needing the proof that her mother was still alive and safe. Elena stirred, eyes opening slowly. When she saw Mara, concern immediately creased her face. Minha filha, you should be resting. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Mara reached for her mother's hand, needing the contact. How are you feeling? Better every day. Elena's fingers squeezed gently. The doctors say I might be able to leave the hospital soon, move to a recovery facility. They're talking about weeks, not months. It's like a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. It was blood money,
purchased with Mara's freedom and sealed with vows she'd spoken under duress.
But Elena didn't need to know the full cost. Not yet.
"That's wonderful," Mara said, managing a smile. "You'll be strong again. Everything we've been through will be worth it." Elena studied her daughter's face with the intensity only a mother could manage. "Something happened. I can see it. Talk to me." Mara hesitated, then the words came spilling out. Not everything, but enough. The wedding that had felt like a funeral, the reception where enemies had circled like sharks, the abduction that had shattered any illusion of safety, and Lucien burning his way through rival territory to get her back, choosing her over strategic advantage. "He could have negotiated," Mara said quietly. "Could have used me as a bargaining chip, consolidated power, played it smart. Instead, he went to war, for me. I still don't understand why." Elena was silent for a long moment. "Because you matter to him. Maybe he doesn't know it yet. Maybe he'd deny it if asked. But actions speak louder than words. He chose you, Mara. That means something. It means I'm valuable leverage." "No." Elena's voice was firm despite her weakness. "Leverage is something you protect until you can trade it away. What you're describing is something different. He risked everything to get you back, didn't he? That's not calculation. That's—" "What?" Mara asked when her mother trailed off. "The beginning of something real," Elena said softly. "I know this marriage started as a transaction. I know you hate him for trapping you this way, but people can surprise you, Mina Filia. Even criminals. Even men who kill for a living." Mara wanted to argue, to insist that Lucien was exactly what he appeared to be. Cold, ruthless, incapable of genuine feeling. But she kept remembering the look on his face when he'd found her in that warehouse. The raw fury and something else. Something almost like fear. She'd seen him kill 3 men without hesitation, watched him issue orders that would end lives, witnessed the absolute control he maintained over himself and everyone around him. But in that moment when he'd pulled her against his chest, when his hands had shaken as they checked her for injuries, he'd been something other than the untouchable crime lord. He'd been human, vulnerable, real. "I don't know what to do with any of this," Mara admitted. "I don't know how to be his wife. I don't know how to survive in his world without losing myself." "Then don't survive," Elena said. "Live. There's a difference."
Surviving is about endurance, about getting through each day without breaking. Living is about finding moments of joy, even in darkness, about holding on to who you are, no matter what circumstances demand. That sounds impossible. Most worthwhile things are. Elena smiled, though exhaustion was already pulling at her features. "Now go home. Rest. You can't take care of anyone else if you don't take care of yourself first." Home. The word felt strange applied to Lucien's penthouse, but Mara supposed that's what it was now. Her home. Her prison. Her future. She kissed her mother's forehead and left before the tears could fall. Anton was waiting in the hallway, ever-present shadow that he'd become since the wedding. He fell into step beside her without a word, professional and alert. They rode the elevator down to the parking garage where the car waited, armored and anonymous. "Mr. Moretti asked me to take you to the penthouse," Anton said as they pulled into traffic. "He's been in meetings all morning, but should be back by noon." Meetings. Mara had learned that was code for dealing with the aftermath of violence, for consolidating power in the vacuum left by dead enemies, for ensuring everyone understood that taking his wife had been the last mistake Dmitry Volkov would ever make. The penthouse felt cavernous when she entered, too much space for one person. Mara wandered through rooms she barely knew, taking in details she'd been too overwhelmed to notice before. Expensive art on the walls, books in multiple languages lining built-in shelves, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. It was beautiful and cold and completely impersonal, like a very expensive hotel suite. She found herself in what appeared to be Lucien's office. Dark wood desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, walls lined with filing cabinets that probably contained enough evidence to put him away for life. A photograph sat on the desk, the only personal item she'd seen anywhere in the penthouse. Mara picked it up carefully. It showed a younger Lucien, maybe early 20s, standing beside an older man who shared his features. Both were smiling, rare expression on Lucien that transformed his face into something almost gentle. "That's my father." Mara spun around, nearly dropping the frame. Lucian stood in the doorway, jacket slung over one shoulder, tie loosened, looking exhausted in a way she hadn't seen before. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's fine." He crossed to the desk, taking the photograph from her hands. His fingers traced the frame's edge, a gesture so unconsciously tender it made Mara's chest ache. "He died 10 years ago. Heart attack. I was 24. "I'm sorry," Mara said quietly. "Don't be. He lived the life he chose, died in his sleep surrounded by family. As far as endings go in our world, that's about as good as it gets." Lucian set the photo down carefully, then looked at her properly for the first time since entering. "You went to see your mother. How did you know?" "Because I would have done the same thing. After violence, we seek out what matters most. It's human nature." He moved to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city spread below. "She's doing well. The doctors are optimistic about her recovery timeline." "You've been checking on her." "Of course, she's your mother. That makes her important." The casual way he said it, like it was obvious, made something twist in Mara's chest. She joined him at the window, maintaining careful distance between them. "Thank you," she said, "for getting me out, for—" She struggled for words that could encompass the magnitude of what he'd done. "For coming after me." "Did you think I wouldn't?" Lucien's voice was quiet, almost curious. "I thought you might negotiate. Use it as an opportunity to consolidate power, eliminate rivals, make strategic moves. Getting me back the way you did, it cost you. Territory, alliances, leverage. I'm not worth that much." He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "You're my wife. That makes you worth everything." "I'm your wife on paper," Mara corrected. "A replacement for the woman you actually chose. We both know this is a business arrangement, Lucien. You don't need to pretend otherwise." Something flashed across his face, too quick to identify. "You're right. This started as business, a contract that needed to be fulfilled, an alliance that had to be maintained. But business doesn't make me drive through enemy territory with a skeleton crew. Business doesn't make me trade away advantages I spent years building. Business would have told me to cut my losses, find another solution, protect my interests first." "Then why?" Mara demanded, frustration bleeding through her careful control. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know, someone you didn't even want?" "Because you stood at that altar and looked at me like I was something worse than death, and you still said the words," Lucian said, his voice rough. "Because when those men took you, I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. Fear. Real, gut-wrenching terror that I might lose something I didn't know I valued until it was gone. Because you're not Victoria, and maybe that's exactly the point." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Mara's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I don't understand what you want from me," she whispered. "Neither do I." He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "But I know I'm tired of pretending this is just business. I know that when I walked into that warehouse and saw you hurt, I wanted to burn the world down. I know that having you here in my space feels right in a way nothing has in a very long time." Mara should have stepped back, should have maintained the distance that kept her safe, that protected her heart from getting tangled up in a situation that was already impossibly complicated. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, starving for gentleness after days of violence and fear. "This is insane," she said. "We're strangers who got married under duress." "People don't fall for each other in a week. People don't do a lot of things," Lucian murmured, "until they do." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like their wedding kiss. No audience, no performance, no careful control. This was raw and real, and utterly devastating. Mara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he responded by lifting her onto the desk, stepping between her legs, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other gripped her hip hard enough to bruise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise you safety," he said quietly. "My world is violence and danger, and people who will always want to hurt you to get to me. I can't promise you normalcy or peace or anything resembling a conventional marriage. But I can promise you this. I will burn down anyone who tries to take you from me again. I will protect you with everything I have, and I will never, ever make you feel like a replacement for something I lost. Mara's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. I'm still angry with you, for trapping me, for using my mother's illness against me, for dragging me into this life without giving me real choice. I know you have every right to be. And I don't trust you, not completely. You're a criminal, Lucien. And you kill people. You run an empire built on suffering. I can't just forget that because you're capable of being gentle sometimes. I wouldn't want you to. His thumb traced her jaw, the touch achingly tender. Don't soften for me, Mara. Don't lose the fire that made you stand at that altar and humiliate me in front of 500 people. I need you exactly as you are, sharp and angry and unwilling to bend. Why? The question came out broken, vulnerable. Because everyone else in my life either fears me or wants something from me. You just want your mother safe and your freedom back. That honesty is rare, valuable. I won't ask you to compromise it. He stepped back, giving her space, and Mara felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. She slid off the desk, smoothing her clothes, trying to regain some equilibrium. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out how to actually be married, Lucien said. The contract is fulfilled, the alliance is secure, your mother is safe. We could maintain separate lives, polite distance, the kind of arrangement many couples in our world have. Or we could try to make this real. See if what we're feeling is just adrenaline and proximity, or something that could actually become... He trailed off, seeming uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. Something worth keeping, Mara finished softly. Yes. She thought about her mother's words, about the difference between surviving and living. Thought about the way Lucien had looked at her in that warehouse, the way his hands had shaken when he'd held her. Thought about the impossible situation they'd been forced into and the surprising tenderness that had somehow grown in the cracks. I can't promise to fall in love with you, she said carefully. I can't promise to forgive what you and my father did, or to accept this life without question, but I can promise to try, to give this a real chance instead of just enduring it. Something that might have been hope flickered in Lucien's eyes. That's more than I expected. More than I deserve, probably. Probably, Mara agreed, but she was almost smiling. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of domesticity that Mara had never imagined possible. Lucien was gone often, meetings, business, the endless demands of running a criminal empire. But when he was home, he was unexpectedly present. They had dinner together most nights, conversations that started awkward and gradually became easier. He told her about his childhood, about inheriting his father's position too young, about the weight of responsibility and the isolation of power. She told him about Sao Paulo, about working 3 jobs and never quite making enough, about her mother's strength and the crushing fear of watching her slowly die, about growing up knowing her father existed somewhere but didn't want her, about building walls around her heart to protect against that particular abandonment. I hated him for so long, Mara admitted one night over wine on the penthouse balcony, the city glittering below them. James, my father. I hated him for leaving, for choosing his legitimate family over us, for all the years we struggled while he lived in luxury. And now? Now? Lucien prompted. Now I don't know what I feel. He's trying, in his way. Checking on my mother, making sure I have everything I need. It doesn't erase the past, but it's something. Maybe that's all we get. Imperfect people trying to make amends for imperfect choices. That's remarkably generous of you. Or remarkably desperate, Mara said wryly. I'm rewriting my entire understanding of family, morality, what kind of life I want. I have to be generous, or I'll drown in bitterness. Lucien reached across the small table, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture had become natural over the past weeks, small touches that grounded them both. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Most people would have broken under the pressure you've faced. You just keep adapting, surviving, finding ways to maintain your humanity in a world designed to strip it away. Is that what you did? Mara asked. Found a way to maintain your humanity? He was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure I did. I think I traded pieces of it away year after year until violence became easy and mercy became weakness. Until I could order someone's death over dinner and sleep soundly that night. That's not humanity, Mara. That's something else. But you came after me, she said softly. You risked everything, went against your own strategic interests, chose human connection over cold calculation. That's not nothing, Lucian. That's not someone who's lost all their humanity. His grip on her hand tightened. You make me want to be better than I am. That's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them, and Mara realized with startling clarity that she was happy, not in spite of her circumstances, but because of them. Because this impossible marriage was becoming something real, something worth protecting. Her mother moved to a recovery facility in upstate New York, a beautiful place surrounded by gardens where Elena could walk and breathe clean air and continue her treatments in peace. Mara visited twice a week, watching her mother grow stronger with each passing day. The hollowness was filling in, the color returning to her cheeks, the light coming back to her eyes. You look different, Elena said during one visit, studying Mara carefully. Happier. Is that possible? I think it might be, Mara admitted. Things with Lucien are complicated, but good complicated. He's not what I expected. No one ever is. Elena smiled, reaching for Mara's hand. I was wrong to tell you not to let this change you. Change isn't bad, Minhafila. It's how we survive, how we grow. Just make sure you're changing into someone you can respect, someone you recognize in the mirror. I'm trying. Some days are easier than others. That's all any of us can do. Elena squeezed her fingers gently. I'm proud of you. I know I've said that before, but I need you to hear it. You took an impossible situation and found a way not just to survive it, but to build something from it. That takes courage I'm not sure I would have had. The words stayed with Mara as autumn turned to winter, as the city transformed under the first snow. She was learning to navigate Lucien's world, the careful politics, the unspoken hierarchies, the delicate balance between showing strength and provoking conflict. She attended functions at his side, learned to read rooms full of dangerous people, discovered she had a talent for diplomacy that surprised them both. You're a natural, Lucian said after one particularly tense dinner with rival family representatives. The way you diffused that argument between Mendoza and the Irish delegation, I've been trying to mediate that dispute for months. I just listened to what they were actually saying versus what they were pretending to say, Mara replied. Mendoza was posturing because he felt disrespected, not because he actually cared about the territory dispute. The Irish were testing boundaries. Give Mendoza public acknowledgement and the Irish private reassurance, and suddenly everyone walks away satisfied. You're wasted on me, Lucian murmured, pulling her close. You should be running the UN or brokering international treaties. I'd rather be here. The words surprised her with their honesty. I'd rather be with you. His kiss tasted like champagne and promise, and Mara let herself sink into it without reservation. They'd been married for 3 months, and she was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt inevitable, like gravity, impossible to fight, pointless to resist. They made love that night with a tenderness that took Mara's breath away, Lucien worshipping her body like she was something precious, something irreplaceable. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets with his heartbeat steady under her ear, Mara felt something click into place. This was home. Not the penthouse, not the city, but this. Being held by someone who saw all of her, the anger and the fear and the strength, and valued every piece. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. Lucien's arms tightened around her. Say it again. I love you. Louder this time, more certain. I love you too. His voice was rough with emotion. I didn't think I was capable of it anymore. Didn't think I had anything left worth giving, but you make me want to try. Make me believe I could be something other than what my world demands. Mara lifted her head, meeting his eyes in the dim light. You don't have to change who you are, Lucien. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking you to let me in, to share this life with me honestly. The good and the terrible, all of it. You don't know what you're asking, he said quietly. The things I've done, the things I'll have to continue doing to maintain power. I know exactly what I'm asking. Mara pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate. I'm not naive anymore. I understand what your world requires. I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. Why? The question was almost desperate.
After everything, after how this started, why would you choose this? Choose me. Because you chose me first, Mara said simply. When it mattered most, when choosing me cost you everything, you did it anyway. That kind of devotion, that kind of loyalty, it's rare, precious. I'd be a fool to walk away from it. Lucien kissed her again, slower this time, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. And Mara kissed him back with equal fervor, tasting their future in the meeting of lips and breath and barely contained emotion. The contract year was supposed to define the end of their obligation to each other, the point at which Mara could walk away with her settlement and her freedom. But as the months approached, neither of them mentioned it.
The date came and went unmarked, uncelebrated, irrelevant. They were choosing this, choosing each other. Every day, in 1,000 small ways, they were building something that transcended obligation or strategy or the brutal pragmatism that had forced them together. It wasn't perfect. There were still nights when Mara woke from nightmares about the warehouse, about being hunted, about violence she couldn't escape. There were still moments when Lucien's coldness frightened her, when she saw the killer beneath the gentle lover and had to reconcile those contradictions. There were still arguments, clashes of will and worldview, moments when their different backgrounds created chasms that seemed impossible to bridge. But they worked through it. They talked. They fought. They made up with a passion that left them both breathless. They learned each other's wounds and healing rituals, discovered shared interests alongside their differences, created routines and rituals that belonged only to them. Mara started writing again, something she'd abandoned years ago when survival became more important than dreams. She filled notebooks with observations about this strange new world, with character sketches of the dangerous people she encountered, with reflections on transformation and choice and the complicated nature of love. Lucien read everything she wrote, offering feedback with surprising insight, encouraging her to pursue publication even when she insisted it was just a hobby. "You have talent," he said firmly, "real talent. Don't waste it because you're afraid of being seen." "I'm not afraid," Mara protested. "You're terrified," he corrected gently. "Being seen means being vulnerable, being judged, risking rejection. I understand that fear intimately, but you taught me that some risks are worth taking. Let me teach you the same lesson." So she submitted a short story to a literary magazine, hands shaking as she hit send. When it was accepted 2 months later, she cried with joy and disbelief in equal measure. Lucien took her to dinner to celebrate, pride evident in every line of his face. "This is just the beginning," he said, raising his glass. "To my brilliant wife, who survived hell and came out writing about it." "To my dangerous husband," Mara countered, touching her glass to his, "who gave me the freedom to create even in captivity." "You were never captive," Lucien said seriously. "Not really. You could have left at any time after the first year. The door was always open, Mara. You just chose not to walk through it. Because what's on this side is worth staying for." She leaned across the table, kissing him softly. "You're worth staying for." The words were true in ways she couldn't fully articulate. This marriage that had started as a cage had become a foundation, something solid to build on. They'd taken a transaction and transformed it into partnership, turned forced proximity into genuine intimacy. Elena moved back to New York City once her treatment was complete, settling into a beautiful apartment that Lucien had arranged without being asked. She was healthy again, vibrant, more herself than Mara had seen her in years. They had dinner together weekly, sometimes including Lucien, sometimes just mother and daughter reconnecting after everything that had changed. "I was wrong about him," Elena admitted one evening over coffee. "I thought he was just another powerful man using you for his own ends. But the way he looks at you, minha filha, that's real love. Messy and complicated, yes, but real." "I know," Mara said softly. "I didn't expect it either. Didn't think it was possible to fall for someone under these circumstances. But here we are." "Here you are," Elena echoed, smiling. "Happy, safe, building a life that's yours by choice, not circumstance. That's all I ever wanted for you." The seasons turned, 1 year bleeding into the next. Mara learned to shoot, insisting that if she was going to be a target, she should at least be able to defend herself. Lucien taught her personally, patient and thorough, never condescending even when her aim was terrible at first. "Better," he he said as she finally hit the center target consistently. You're a natural. I hate that this is necessary, Mara said, lowering the gun. Hate that my life requires knowing how to kill. I know. Lucien moved behind her, arms bracketing hers, adjusting her stance with gentle pressure. But necessary and hateful aren't mutually exclusive. You can despise the reality while still adapting to it. That's what survival looks like in our world.
Our world, Mara repeated. When did it become our world instead of yours? The moment you stopped being a victim of it and started shaping it. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You've changed things, Mara. The way other families see us, the way negotiations happen, the precedents we're setting. You bring humanity to a world that desperately needs it. She turned in his arms, weapons safely pointed away. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you for exactly who you are. Killer and protector, criminal and partner, brutal and gentle. All of it. I love you too. The words came easier now, after months of practice. More than I thought myself capable of. More than is probably smart or safe. But I can't seem to help it. They stood together in the private shooting range, holding each other among the smell of gunpowder and the echo of violence, and Mara understood that this was their truth. Beauty carved from brutality, tenderness born from trauma, love built on the foundation of impossible choices. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself a year ago. It was better and worse in equal measure, complicated and dangerous and occasionally terrifying. But it was hers. Theirs. Built not from obligation, but from conscious choice, renewed daily with every decision to stay, to try, to keep building something worth protecting. The forgotten daughter had become a woman impossible to ignore. The marriage that began as a prison had transformed into a partnership built on trust and tested by fire. And the future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer terrifying, because they would face it together. The spring came warm and sudden, transforming the city overnight from gray winter to vibrant green. Mara stood on the penthouse balcony watching cherry blossoms drift past on the breeze, coffee warming her hands, and felt something she'd never expected to feel in this life: contentment. 18 months had passed since the wedding that had felt like a funeral. 18 months of learning to navigate a world she'd never chosen, of transforming from victim to participant, of falling in love with a man who'd started as her captor and become her partner. The journey hadn't been linear or easy, but standing here now, watching the city wake beneath a golden sunrise, Mara couldn't imagine being anywhere else. You're up early. She turned to find Lucien being in the doorway, hair disheveled from sleep, wearing only pajama pants. Even after all these months, the sight of him still made her heart skip, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. Couldn't sleep, she said. Too much thinking. He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. About? Everything. How much has changed? How different my life is from what I imagined. She leaned back into his warmth. I got an email from my publisher this morning. They want to do a book deal, a full collection of essays about immigration, identity, the space between worlds. Lucien's arms tightened. Mara, that's incredible. Why don't you sound excited? Because writing about my life means writing about yours too. About this world, the choices we've made, the compromises required to survive here. I can't do that without exposing things you've spent years keeping hidden. He was quiet for a moment, and Mara felt tension creep into his shoulders. Finally, he turned her to face him, hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. Write it, he said firmly. Write everything. The truth, the complexity, all of it. Don't censor yourself to protect me. Lucien, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. His dark eyes were serious, intense in the morning light. You've spent 18 months adapting to my world, making space for my needs and my empire and my violence. It's time I made space for yours. If writing this book means exposing some of what I am, what we are, then so be it. Your voice matters more than my secrets. Mara's throat closed with emotion. You might regret that. I might, he agreed, but I'll regret silencing you more. Write the book, Amor. Tell our story the way only you can. The endearment still made her shiver. Amor,
love in the Italian his father had taught him, reserved only for the most private moments.
She kissed him softly, tasting coffee and promise and the future they were still building together. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "I love you too." He pulled back, studying her face. "There's something else. What aren't you telling me?" Mara hesitated, then decided honesty was always the right choice between them. "My father called yesterday.
He wants to have dinner, all of us together. You, me, Catherine, him. A family dinner, he called it." Lucian's expression hardened.
"How do you feel about that?"
Conflicted, Mara moved back to the railing, looking out at the city. Part of me wants nothing to do with him. He's the reason I'm in this life, the reason I had to make impossible choices. But another part of me wonders if maybe Elena was right. Maybe imperfect people making imperfect amends is all we get. Maybe I need to decide whether holding on to anger is worth losing the possibility of something better.
"He doesn't deserve your forgiveness," Lucien said quietly. "Not after what he did, how he used you. Maybe not, but maybe I deserve the peace that comes from letting it go." She turned back to him. "Will you come with me? To dinner, I mean. I can't do it alone." "Of course." He closed the distance between them again. "Whatever you need, wherever you need to go, I'm with you. Always."
The dinner was scheduled for Saturday at the Harrington estate, the same house where Mara's life had irrevocably changed. She dressed carefully in a designer dress that Lucien had bought her, deep burgundy silk that made her look powerful and untouchable. War paint, she thought wryly, for a battle that would be fought with words instead of weapons. Anton drove them through familiar streets, through the bridge into Westchester, down the tree-lined drive that led to the gray stone mansion. Mara's hands were shaking. Lucien laced his fingers through hers, squeezing gently. "We can leave any time you want," he murmured. "Just say the word." "I know." That knowledge gave her strength. James and Catherine were waiting in the same study where Mara had first learned about the contract that would reshape her existence. James looked older, more worn, the weight of his choices evident in new lines around his eyes. Catherine was elegant as always, but her expression was less frozen than Mara remembered, softened by something that might have been regret. "Mara." James stood, uncertain. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Mara said honestly. She took a seat, Lucien beside her, solid and reassuring. "But I'm here. So say what you need to say." James exchanged a glance with Catherine, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology that's 18 months overdue. Longer than that, actually. 25 years overdue." His voice was rough with emotion Mara had never heard from him before. "What I did to you, to your mother, was inexcusable. Abandoning you, pretending you didn't exist, then dragging you into this world when I needed something from you. All of it was selfish and cruel and wrong." "Yes," Mara said quietly. "It was." "I told myself I was protecting you by staying away," James continued, "that you were better off without this life, without me. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From responsibility, from the difficulty of explaining you to my wife and legitimate daughter, from having to reconcile the man I wanted to be with the man I actually was." Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice softer than Mara had ever heard it. "I knew about you. About Elena. James told me years ago. And I'm ashamed to say I was relieved when he chose to stay away from you both. It was easier to pretend you didn't exist than to face the complication you represented." The admission hung in the air, stark and honest. "Victoria knew too," Catherine continued, and now there were tears in her eyes. "Before she died, she found documents, photographs of you and Elena. She was planning to reach out, to meet you. She wanted a sister. And then she tried to run from the engagement and—" Her voice broke. "And we lost her." Mara's chest tightened. She'd never allowed herself to think much about Victoria, about the half-sister who'd been a stranger. But hearing that Victoria had wanted to know her created an ache of lost possibility. "I don't know how to forgive you," Mara said, the words coming from somewhere deep and raw. "I don't know if I can. You took my choices, my freedom, my life, and twisted it to serve your purposes. You used my love for my mother as a weapon against me. That's not something that just goes away because you apologize." "I know," James said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mara. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I am asking for a chance to try to be better, to be the father I should have been from the beginning. It's too late to fix the past, but maybe it's not too late to build something resembling a relationship going forward."
"Why now?" Mara asked. "Why suddenly care after all these years?" "Because Victoria's death taught me that time isn't infinite," James said quietly. "Because watching you navigate this world with such strength and grace makes me proud in a way I have no right to be. Because your mother called me 3 days ago and told me I was a coward for not trying harder to make amends with you."
Despite everything, Mara felt a smile tug at her lips. That sounded exactly like Elena, fierce and direct and unwilling to let people hide from their responsibilities. "She called you a coward?" "Among other things," James said, his own mouth quirking, "your mother has never been shy about telling me exactly what she thinks of me. It's one of the things I loved about her, actually, that honesty, that refusal to be anything less than completely herself." The past tense stung. Loved, not love, reminding Mara that whatever her parents had shared was long over, killed by distance and abandonment and James's choices. Lucian's hand tightened on hers, grounding her. She took a breath. "I can't promise to forgive you," she said carefully. "Not yet, maybe not ever, but I can promise to try to build something new. Not father-daughter, exactly, but something. We share blood and history and this strange, complicated world. Maybe that's enough to start with." Relief washed across James's face. "That's more than I hoped for. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Mara warned. "I'm still angry. I'm still processing everything that happened. There will be days when I can't stand to be in the same room with you, but I'm willing to try because my mother taught me that holding on to rage only poisons the person carrying it." They had dinner after that, awkward at first but gradually becoming easier. Catherine shared stories about Victoria, not the perfect heiress Mara had imagined, but a real girl with doubts and dreams and a rebellious streak that had ultimately cost her life. James talked about building his empire, about the choices that had seemed necessary at the time but haunted him now. And Lucien, surprisingly, opened up about his own father, about inheriting power too young and the isolation that came with it. Mara watched him engage with her father as an equal, watched two powerful men find common ground in their shared understanding of what leadership cost. When the evening ended and they were back in the car heading toward the city, Mara felt lighter than she had in months. "How do you feel?" Lucien asked. "Like maybe healing is possible," Mara said. "Not forgetting, not erasing what happened, but finding a way to move forward that doesn't require carrying all that weight forever." "That's good." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You deserve peace, Amor, in every part of your life." The weeks that followed were full in ways Mara had never experienced. She threw herself into writing the book, finding that the words poured out once she gave herself permission to tell the truth. She wrote about Sao Paulo and survival, about her mother's strength and her father's absence. She wrote about the wedding that had felt like a funeral, about learning to navigate violence and power, about falling in love with a man who'd started as her jailer. Elena read early drafts, offering feedback and encouragement. "This is important work, Minafila. People need to hear these stories, to understand that survival comes in many forms." Mara also began volunteering at an immigrant resource center in Brooklyn, using her experience navigating bureaucracy and her new connections to help others find their footing in America. It was satisfying work that grounded her, reminded her of where she'd come from and why that mattered. Lucien supported everything, even when it meant less time together, even when her writing exposed aspects of his world he'd prefer to keep hidden. He read every draft, offered thoughtful feedback, never asked her to soften the truth to protect him. "You're making me better," he said one night after reading a particularly raw chapter about the violence inherent in his empire. "Forcing me to see myself clearly, to reckon with what I've become. That's uncomfortable, but necessary." "Are you angry?" Mara asked carefully. "No." He set the manuscript aside, pulling her into his lap. "I'm grateful. You make me want to be worthy of how you see me. That's a gift, even when it's difficult to receive." They made love that night with a tenderness that still surprised Mara, even after months of intimacy. Lucien worshipped her body like it was sacred, like she was something precious he'd been given charge of protecting. And Mara gave herself over completely, trusting him with her vulnerability in ways she'd never trusted anyone. Afterward, Wrapped in sheets that cost more than her mother's entire apartment had, Mara felt a wave of emotion so strong it made her breath catch. "What is it?" Lucian asked immediately, always attuned to her shifts in mood. "I'm happy," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think that was possible a year ago. Didn't think I'd ever feel anything but trapped and angry and desperate. But I'm happy, Lucian. I love my life. I love you. And that's terrifying because it means I have something to lose." He rolled them over, bracing himself above her, dark eyes fierce in the dim light. "Nothing is going to take this from us. I won't allow it." "You can't control everything," Mara said gently. "No matter how powerful you are, some things are outside even your reach." "Watch me." The words were arrogant, absolute, utterly Lucian. "I've built an empire from nothing, survived wars that should have killed me, protected what's mine against impossible odds. You think I'm going to lose you now, after everything we've survived to get here?" "I'm not talking about enemies or violence," Mara said. "I'm talking about life, about time, about all the ordinary ways we can lose each other. What if you wake up one day and realize this isn't what you wanted? What if I do? Then we figure it out together." Lucien lowered himself, body pressing hers into the mattress, grounding and reassuring. "That's what partnership means, Amor. We don't run when things get hard. We don't give up when doubt creeps in. We stay and we fight for what we've built." "Promise me," Mara whispered. "I promise." He kissed her softly. "Every day, in every way that matters, I choose you. I will always choose you." The book was published in early summer to unexpected critical acclaim. Reviewers praised Mara's unflinching honesty, her ability to capture the complexity of survival and choice, the way she refused to make herself purely victim or victor. Sales were strong, and suddenly Mara found herself invited to give readings, to speak at universities, to share her story with audiences who saw themselves in her struggle. Lucien accompanied her to her first public reading at an independent bookstore in the village, standing in the back of the crowded room with Anton at his side. Mara read the chapter about their wedding, about standing at the altar and making vows that felt like surrender, and when she looked up, she found Lucien watching her with an expression that made her voice catch: pride, love, and something else, something that looked almost like awe. During the Q&A afterward, a young woman raised her hand. "How did you forgive him? The man who forced you into this marriage? How did you get past that to build something real?" Mara considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure I did forgive him. Not completely. Some wounds don't fully heal. They just become scars we learn to live with. But I did choose to see him clearly, without the filter of my anger or fear. And what I saw was someone as trapped by circumstances as I was, someone trying to survive in a brutal world while maintaining some shred of humanity. That understanding didn't erase what he did, but it created space for something new to grow." She looked at Lucien as she spoke, and he nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding passing between them without words. After the reading, they walked through the village hand in hand, stopping for gelato despite the late hour. The city was alive around them, people laughing and arguing and living their complicated lives, and Mara felt a surge of belonging so strong it brought tears to her eyes. "What?" Lucien asked, noticing immediately. "This." She gestured at the street, the people, the life flowing around them. "I never thought I'd have this. Normal moments in the middle of our extraordinary life. Gelato after a book reading. Walking through the city with the person I love. It seemed impossible." "Nothing about us is normal," Lucien said, amusement coloring his voice. "No," Mara agreed, "but we found a way to create normal moments anyway. That's what matters." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, finishing their gelato, watching the city breathe around them. Finally, Lucien spoke. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, simple black velvet. Mara's heart stuttered. "Lucien, it's not what you think," he said quickly. "Open it." Inside was a key, old and ornate, attached to an address tag. "What is this?" "A house," Lucien said, "in the hills outside the city. I bought it 3 months ago and have been having it renovated. It's yours, Mara, completely yours. A place where you can write, where your mother can visit, where we can build something that belongs to both of us, instead of just existing in my space." Mara stared at the key, emotion clogging her throat. The penthouse had always felt like Lucien's territory, beautiful but impersonal, a reflection of his taste and his life before her. The idea of a space that was theirs, built together, chosen together, felt monumental. "Can we see it?" she asked. "Now?" "Right now." They drove north as night fell properly dark, the city lights fading behind them. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, set back from the road behind old trees. Colonial style, painted soft gray with white trim, flower boxes beneath the windows already planted with herbs and blooms. Inside, it was perfect. Not too big, not ostentatious, just beautiful and warm and clearly designed with Mara in mind. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves already filled with books she loved, a sun-drenched office with a view of the garden, a kitchen that was actually meant for cooking, not just display, guest rooms for Elena, for friends, for the life they were building. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Lucian said, watching her explore with barely contained hope. "I had them install a reading nook by the window like you mentioned wanting once. And there's a studio in the converted garage if you want space dedicated just to writing." Mara turned to him, tears streaming freely now. "This is too much." "It's not enough," Lucien said firmly. "You've given me everything, Mara. Your forgiveness, your trust, your love. You've made me believe I could be something other than what this life demanded. A house is the least I can give you in return." She kissed him then, deep and desperate and full of emotion she couldn't articulate. He responded immediately, lifting her, carrying her up the stairs to the bedroom that would become theirs, laying her down on the bed with infinite gentleness. They made love surrounded by boxes still waiting to be unpacked, in a house that represented everything they'd built together and everything they were still building. And when Mara finally fell asleep in Lucian's arms, she dreamed not of violence or fear, but of a future full of quiet moments and chosen family and love that had been forged in fire and emerged stronger for it. The house became their refuge. They spent weekends there, away from the demands of Lucian's empire and Mara's growing public profile. Elena visited often, delighting in the garden and the peace, in watching her daughter build a life that was genuinely hers. James came once, awkward and uncertain, bringing expensive wine and old photographs of Mara as a child that Elena had sent him over the years. It was strange seeing herself through his eyes, seeing evidence that he'd at least kept track of her existence even when he'd refused to be part of her life. "I'd like to be part of your life now," he said, carefully, "if you'll let me. Not as a replacement for what should have been, but as something new, whatever shape that takes." Mara considered him, this man who'd caused so much pain but was genuinely trying to make amends. She thought about forgiveness and healing, about the difference between forgetting and moving forward. "Okay," she said finally, "we can try." It wasn't easy. There were still moments of anger, of resentment that flared hot and unexpected. There were arguments and uncomfortable silences and the constant navigation of complicated emotions. But slowly, carefully, they built something resembling a relationship. Not perfect, but real. Catherine reached out too, sending books she thought Mara would enjoy, occasionally joining for dinners where they talked about literature and art and carefully avoided the gaping wound of Victoria's absence. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was connection, and that mattered. 2 years after the wedding that had felt like a funeral, Mara stood in the garden of their house, surrounded by people who'd become family in unexpected ways. Elena was there, healthy and vibrant, laughing at something Anton said. James and Catherine had come, bringing champagne and genuine warmth. Lucien's closest associates mingled with Mara's friends from the immigrant center, creating an unlikely community. They were celebrating the publication of Mara's second book, a novel this time, fiction rooted in truth about transformation and choice and the complicated nature of love. The reviews had been even better than the first book, and there was already talk of film adaptation. Lucien found her alone for a moment, pulling her away from the crowd, his hands warm on her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Deliriously," Mara said honestly. "A year ago, even 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this. All these people, all this joy, this life we've built. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. You deserve it," he kissed her softly. "Every moment of happiness, every success, every peaceful day. You've earned all of it." "We've earned it," Mara corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Mara stood in her office looking at the wall of photographs she'd been building. Her mother in the hospital, smiling despite her illness. The bookstore reading where she'd first felt like a real writer. Lucien at the house, covered in paint from helping renovate. James and Catherine at a stilted but genuine dinner. Elena and her in the garden, faces pressed close, laughing at some shared joke. Each image captured a moment of transformation, a step away from the desperate girl who'd arrived in New York with nothing but fear and anger. Each one showed her becoming someone new, not by forgetting who she'd been, but by integrating that person into who she was becoming. She'd been the forgotten daughter, dismissed and discarded by a father who couldn't be bothered to acknowledge her existence. She'd been forced into a marriage that felt like a prison, trapped by circumstances she couldn't control and choices that weren't really choices at all. But she'd refused to stay trapped, refused to let survival be her only goal. She'd fought and adapted and found ways to claim agency even in impossible situations. She'd fallen in love with a man who'd started as her captor and became her partner. She'd built a career from her pain, transformed trauma into art, created meaning from chaos. The forgotten daughter had become impossible to ignore. The forced bride had chosen her husband with eyes wide open. The victim had become the author of her own story. Lucien appeared in the doorway, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He'd shed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, looked relaxed and content in ways he never had before meeting her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, handing her a glass. "Transformation," Mara said. "How much we've both changed, how different everything is from where we started." "Regrets?" "None." The answer was immediate, certain. "Not anymore. There were things I wish had happened differently, choices I wish I'd been able to make freely, but I can't regret where those experiences led me. Can't regret finding you, finding us, finding this life." Lucien set down his wine, pulling her close. "I love you. I will never stop being grateful that you chose to stay, to give us a chance, to build something real from the wreckage of how we started." "I love you too." Mara pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for letting me transform us both, for being brave enough to change with me instead of forcing me to change alone." They stood together in the quiet house, holding each other as night deepened around them, and Mara understood that this was the ending she'd been writing toward all along. Not perfect, not simple, but honest and hard-won and completely theirs. The contract that had forced them together was long expired and forgotten. The marriage that had begun as obligation had become partnership. The love that shouldn't have existed had taken root and flourished against all odds. Mara Moretti had been forged in fire and emerged stronger for it. She'd taken a life she never chose and made it her own through sheer force of will and stubborn refusal to be broken. She'd found family in unlikely places, built bridges across impossible divides, created beauty from brutality. And standing here in the home they'd chosen together, in the arms of the man she'd chosen despite everything, Mara felt something she'd chased her entire life finally settle into place. She felt free. Not because she'd escaped, but because she'd stopped running. Not because circumstances had changed, but because she had. Not because the cage had opened, but because she'd realized she'd been holding the key all along. The forgotten daughter could never be erased again. The forced bride had become a woman of power and purpose. And the future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening, because she would face it on her own terms, with people who chose her as fiercely as she chose them. This was her story, her life, her choice, and it was exactly where she was meant to be.